This is the Modified Boxplots worksheet. Number 1 says the data below shows the weekly incomes for a sample of 11th grade boys and girls. We have a list of boys here and their income and girls and their income. Part A says to find the mean for each data set. So you're going to need to do this one by one. Also note that Part B says the standard deviation. And then Part E farther down asks for the 5-number summary. So let's go ahead and try the boys data first. So take a second just to enter in these values into L1. Once you've done that on your calculator, you should be able to get X bar. And again, this is a sample, so I'm using that variable. And I'll put down boys down here, B for boys. And our mean for boys would be $106.36. You'll also note that the standard deviation, again, we're going to use an S since this is a sample for boys, is equal to $22.48. In addition, I'm going to go down to E where it asks for the 5-number summary. You'll see that also listed on your calculator. And for boys, the 5-number summary is going to be 75, 90, 100, 125, 150. Once you have all of those values down, and if you didn't get any of those correct values, you want to make sure you go back and check L1 to make sure those numbers are entered in correct. So the next thing you're going to do is the same thing but for the girls' data. So go ahead and clear the data for the boys in L1, and now you're going to enter in the girl data into L1. Once you have that, remember, go to one-var stats, and you should get the mean for girls, and I'll put a G for girls, and this is going to be $97.78, and our standard deviation for girls is going to be $59.27. And then you'll also notice that under one-var stats we do get all the information for our 5-number summary. So for girls, the smallest value we have is 50, then we have 67.5, 80, 97.5, and our max value would be 250. So next thing we're going to do is go back up to C and D. Part C says discuss whether boys or girls have a higher average weekly income. And so if you look at the boys' mean and the girls' mean, then you'll be able to see that the boys' mean is 106.36 and the girls' mean is 97.78. So the boys' average weekly income is higher. And this is because that mean value is 106.36 versus the girls, which is 97.78. Part D, it says discuss whether boys or girls have a more consistent weekly income. Remember, different ways to look at things being consistent. We saw in a previous problem, the one where we did side-by-side box plots with potatoes. That one we looked at the interquartile range. Another way to do that is to look at our standard deviation. If you remember, a larger standard deviation means that data is more spread out. And if the smaller standard deviation, that means that those data values are closer together. So if you look at the standard deviation for boys and the standard deviation for girls, you'll see that the boys have a smaller standard deviation, so that means that it's more consistent. So boys are more consistent. And the reason why is because the standard deviation is smaller. So part E says find the 5-number summary, which we have done already. And then part F says use the data to draw a side-by-side box plot of the data and clearly show any outliers. So in order to do this, we need to take our boys data and calculate our interquartile range and our lower fence and our upper fence. Likewise, we need to do the same thing for the girls. Calculate our interquartile range, lower fence, and upper fence. The interquartile range for the boys is going to be Q3 minus Q1, which is 125 minus 90, which works out to being 35. The lower fence, which is going to be Q1 minus 1.5 times the interquartile range, which will work out to being 37.5. And then your upper fence, which is Q3 plus 1.5 times the interquartile range, which that will work out to being 177.5. So now carefully look at your boys' data to see if you have any outliers. Again, outliers would be smaller than your lower fence or larger than your upper fence. And you'll notice that you have no outliers. Likewise, for the girls' data, we need to calculate the interquartile range, which is Q3 minus Q1, so 97.5 minus 67.5, which works out to be 30. Our lower fence is Q1 minus 1.5 times the interquartile range, which is 22.5. Our upper fence, which is Q3 plus 1.5 times the IQR, and so we have a value of 142.5. And so looking at your girls' data, do we have any outliers? And again, an outlier would be something smaller than the lower fence and larger than our upper fence. And you'll notice that $250, that income, is an outlier. So since this is an outlier, that means that this value is an outlier, and we mark that on our graph with a star or a bold point. And so that means that since that is an outlier in a bold point or a star, that means that we have to have a new max value. So since 250 is an outlier, the new max value is, and so you need to go back up to our data, and if you look at the girls' data, you'll see that 250 is our outlier, so the next largest value that we have is 100, and so that is our new max value. So our new max value will be 100. So that means I'm going to cross this off, and our new max value will be 100. So from here, we need to do our side-by-side box plots. So I'm going to go ahead and draw an axis down here, and the axes will be for weekly income. The smallest value that we have would be our lower fence, which was 22.5, and our largest value would be that 250. So I'm going to go ahead and count by 25s. I'm going to start at 0 and count by 25s. And again, going out to 250, since that was our largest value that we have. Labeling this is weekly income, and it is in dollars. So I'm going to go ahead and do the boys' values first. And our 5-number summary for boys is 75, 90, 100, 125, and 150. So making our box and our whiskers stemming from there. This would be for our boys. And then we also need to make sure we add in our lower fence, which is at 37.5, and our upper fence, which is at 177.5. Next, we'll do girls right above. And the 5-number summary for the girls is at 50, 67.5, 80, 97, 0.5, and then again, remember that that new max value that we had was 100. So now making our box plot and extending those sides out to our max and our min value. Make sure that for 250 for girls, that value is an outlier, and I'll put a star out there for 250. I also need to put my lower fence on, which is at 22.5. And also my upper fence, which is at 142.5. So this is my side-by-side box plots for our data. And again, this is an outlier marked out over here. And that's at $250 for girls.